I was cleaning up the files on my laptop recently, and I came across this gem, shall we say. It's a video of the second speech I ever gave at a Toastmasters meeting. It's from August of 2015, and it's not a performance I'm overly proud of. Let's just say when I watched it back now after all these years, my first thought was, I need to bury this video out in the desert where no one will ever see it again. And then I remembered that I live in Toronto. I'm nowhere near the desert, so I had to come up with a different plan. Then I remembered the words of 1999 world champion of public speaking Craig Valentine. He said, "Sharing your firsts is an excellent way to endear yourself to and connect with your audience." Unfortunately, nobody recorded my first ever speech at a Toastmasters event, my icebreaker, if you will. So the second speech I ever gave is as close as we're going to get. With that in mind, your next speaker is doing Project 2 from the Competent Communicator Manual, Organize Your Speech. His objectives are: select an appropriate outline which allows listeners to easily follow and understand your speech. Make your message clear with supporting material directly contributing to that message. Use appropriate transitions when moving from one idea to another. Create a strong opening and conclusion. Time, 5 to 7 minutes. Please welcome your next speaker, John Andrews, and his speech, Wayne Gretzky, the greatest unqualified hockey player of all time. Wayne Gretzky, the greatest unqualified hockey player of all time, John Andrews. Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, fans of every sport love to debate who the greatest of all time is. And hockey fans are no different. But we should be, because there is no discussion about who the greatest of all time was. Wayne Gretzky is far and away the most dominant hockey player and probably the most dominant athlete of any sport. This discussion should not take place. And I'm going to talk to you about his level of dominance. I'm going to talk to you about his wide dominance, his deep dominance, and then his real dominance. Before I get to that, I want to talk about the title of my speech, which is The Greatest Unqualified Hockey Player of All Time. You hear that, you probably think I'm going to tell you that he did not deserve to be a hockey player because he lacked some kind of qualifications. And that is true. He wasn't very big, wasn't very strong, wasn't very fast, and he didn't have a hard shot. Yet, he was the most dominant of all time. So in a sense, yes, that's how he was not qualified. But when I say he's the unqualified greatest of all time, I mean something else. And you'll find out what I mean in 4 to 6 minutes. But first, I want to talk about his wide dominance. His name is all over the NHL record book. At the time he retired, he held 61 official records, plus the unofficial record of holding the most records. The records he holds are not minor. Of the 12 most important, he holds 11, and the 12th is a funny story. He holds the records for most goals, assists, and points in a career, regular season, most goals, assists, and points in a career, playoffs, most goals, assists, and points in a single season, and most assists and points in a single playoff year. So the one I missed was, or the one he missed, most goals in a single playoff year. That's held by his line mate, Jari Kurri. And that year, he beat Wayne Gretzky by 2 goals, and that was the year Wayne was setting the record for most assists in the playoffs. He had to pass it to somebody, and he couldn't pass it to himself. That's how wide his dominance is. When I say deep dominance, it's impressive enough to be number 1. With his achievements, you have to search long and hard to find the next guy. He holds the record for most goals in one season with 92. I'm trying to keep the numbers to a minimum here, lest you glaze over, but I have to do it here. 92 goals in a season. Do you know who holds the second highest mark for goals in a season? 86? It's also Wayne Gretzky. You have to get to number 3 before you find a new name. As far as points in a season goes, he's the only player who managed to get 200 points in a single season, and he did it 4 times. You have to get to number 5 before you get to the next guy, the fifth highest point total. When you talk about assists in a season, he is number 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and he's tied for number 8. That's how far you go before you get to the next guy. And this one's my favorite. He holds the record for most regular season points in a career. If you do not include the goals he scored, and keep in mind he scored more than everybody, if you just went on the basis of his assists, he would still have more points than the next guy. That's how far you have to go to get to the next guy. That is deep dominance. I'd also like to talk to you finally about his real dominance. People make cases for other hockey players being the greatest of all time. Every case you make for another hockey player is hypothetical. You have to use the words if only. If only that guy didn't wreck his knees, he would have been the greatest. If only that guy didn't have a bad back, he would have been the greatest. If only that guy didn't have Hodgkin's disease, he would have been the greatest. If only, if only, if only. The only you use with this man is that he's the only one who actually went out there and did it. Nothing hypothetical, just real dominance. Everybody else's greatness in the hockey world is qualified somehow. We say, well, he is the greatest player of the 50s. He's the greatest player of the post-cap era. He is the greatest defenseman of all time. All of those are qualified. There are no qualifications with Wayne Gretzky's achievements because he is the greatest unqualified player of all time. Toastmaster. And Toastmaster. Is it over yet? Wow. So that was the second speech I ever gave way back in 2015. Did you notice I had no idea what to do with my hands while I spoke? Did you notice how many times I looked down at my notes? The one thing you can say about that speech is I rocked. I physically rocked. Back and forth. I just could not stand still. Talk about your humble beginnings, eh? If you had told me that night that 2 years later I would be in the top 10 of the World Championship of Public Speaking, I would not have believed you. If you told me that night that 3 years later I would be a certified world-class speaking coach helping other speakers improve themselves, I would not have believed you. If you had told me that night that 4 years later I would be traveling around Toronto giving workshops on public speaking in some of those big buildings downtown, I would not have believed you. But here we are. They all happened. The thing is, they didn't just happen. I didn't just show up to my club meetings every once in a while. I didn't always take the roles that were the easiest, and I definitely never wrote a speech on the bus ride to my meeting and then deliver that speech with almost no preparation. And yet, this is what I see from Toastmasters all the time. They seem to believe they can float through the program, pick up some skills by osmosis, but you know what happens? After a couple of months when they have to renew their membership, they reassess and realize, hey, my speaking skills have not improved at all. This is not worth my time and money. If they were more honest in their assessment, they would say, I have done very little to improve my skills over this time. There are a number of things you can do to improve your speaking. Be the guest speaker at another club. See how a different audience reacts to you. Maybe you can mix up your speaking style, find a different stage persona that resonates better with the audience. Maybe what you need to do is get yourself a coach who can mentor you and make you better. Well, there are a number of things you can do to improve yourself, but they all have something in common. They are things you have to do. Improvement doesn't just happen. So now you've seen one of my early speeches. I invite you to compare that to one of my speeches on my YouTube channel or on the video section of my website. As I've said many times, Every great speaker began as a poor speaker. So if you are a poor speaker, I have good news for you. You can become a much better speaker. But here's the thing. Improvement doesn't just happen. You have to make it happen. You have to put in the hard work. To steal a line from the greatest unqualified hockey player of all time, Wayne Gretzky, the only thing that beats hard work is hardworking talent. So keep it tuned here to lastrites.com. That's last-writes.com. And together we, that's you and I, we will lay boring speeches to rest by giving them the last rites.